For early access plus exclusive content, facilitated discussions, live one-on-one Q&As, and more, become a patron at patreon.com/BrucePointset. Welcome back to the Blacktastic Adventure. I'm your host, Bruce Pointset. And on today's episode, I speak with Jason Lamb. Jason Lamb is co-host and producer of Minority Retort, Portland's Black and Brown stand-up comedy show, co-producer of the Blackonteurs, the all-Black African-American storytelling show, and writer of numerous unpublished comic books and unproduced screenplays. So I've known Jason for, maybe feels like a few years, maybe several years now. He's invited me actually to be on both the Blackonteurs as well as Minority Retort's now defunct, but hopefully it'll come back one day. Used to be a weekly radio show, and I've done, been interviewed a couple of times on there. But Jason will, as you see in this interview, he describes his just passion for creating things as a sickness, but I truly believe it's a gift. And I think, with Minority Retort being, one of the premier stand-up showcases for Black and Brown people in the Northwest, and the Blackonteurs being, just a great opportunity to see the spectrum of Blackness in a storytelling format, and a format that really just like facilitates community and fun. These are things that undoubtedly, I think unquestionably, have made the city of Portland better. So I would just want to say I want Jason to keep doing what he does, and let's put some money behind this. But anyways, I'm getting off task. Jason and I talked about his being a transplant, coming to Portland, finding different creative niches. And we just had a great conversation. I think you're really going to enjoy it. Check it out. Okay, Jason, welcome to the Blacktastic Adventure. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks a lot for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's you've had me on Minority Retort radio. I think it's been more than once now, I think. So
yeah, I think we did it twice, if I recall right.
Yeah, and on stage, we'll talk about that later. But first, honestly, just want to, we haven't talked in a little bit. I just want to ask you, how are you doing? And, in the midst of the pandemic, especially someone who does a lot of stuff that was, on stage in theaters, how's it been just kind of like navigating, once in a lifetime ordeal?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, I guess I deal with it currently by, knocking on wood and hoping that is just a once in a lifetime deal. With all the crazy stuff that's going on out there, and the variants and everything, and hopefully we'll be able to get that under control. But I think otherwise, obviously it's at minimum a very interesting time for everyone, but someone who puts together like live events and things. I mean, I should say, first of all, I'm very lucky and that everyone in my family's healthy and everything, and I still have a job and stuff like that, and being able to survive throughout things, because I know, a lot of people obviously dealing with a lot of different struggles in a lot of different ways. But so, from that standpoint, I feel very good about, where I am. But but as far as putting the like live shows and stuff together, and not having that available for essentially a year, I mean, fortunate that it's it's not my main income or anything, so because that would be very difficult to live off what I make from whatever these live shows produce. But unlike other people who like this is their thing, like comedians not having an opportunity to perform for a year and having to do other stuff that's not what they want to do, I was already in that position. So I can't imagine what it must be like for, or must have been like for them, that whole year of not only just having your main revenue go away, but just your main outlet for doing something. And that's kind of more and more I was more affected is, you know, I don't necessarily do this stuff for money, but just putting together something, getting up on its own legs and, you know, making it exist in the world, you know, and having it be something that hopefully people enjoy, you know, and for the most part, people have enjoyed the shows and stuff. So not having that creative outlet was really the thing that got to me more than anything else. But, you know, at the end of the day, I think you just got to count your lucky stars while you still have them, those, you know? So that's kind of where I'm at with it. But I'm excited to have things kind of coming back, and hopefully, you know, things won't get derailed once again.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel that kind of like, you know, while some things are definitely inconvenient, you definitely gotta like, you know, like I said, count your stars and whatnot. And you know, like you said, I think it was something about just like the spirit, especially just like I haven't gone to, you know, Minority Retort shows, I haven't gone to things like the Blackonteurs, that like, yeah, just the like spirit, the feeling you get from that. And then, you know, having a year or so now without it, like you definitely feel it. With that in mind though, you recently, this was the first show back with Minority Retort recently, right? Can you just talk about, you know, just, and we'll talk more about the whole the story of Minority Retort and kind of like with stuff, but like just can you just talk about what it was like being back for that first show in person?
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of a weird feeling because, I mean, I guess just for myself personally, you know, I never been really much of like a joiner, you know, like I'm not really like the group, you know, person. You know, I do well by myself, and you know, so you know, it never really felt like part of like a thing, you know, necessarily. Um, and so, you know, the idea of like the social gatherings and stuff, like we're not being able to do that, like, you know, it's nice and it was great, but it was never like a huge part of like the thing that fulfilled me, you know, or at least I thought, you know, as going through this whole pandemic thing. And but you know, having it taken away, and it's just one of those things like, you know, I guess you don't appreciate it once it's taken away, you know, until it's taken away. And that's kind of what it was like for me, is just like, you know, not be able to do shows, not be able to have that social interaction with, you know, with large groups or being part of the community. And I didn't really realize it that much, I think, until like maybe, you know, 6 months in. It's like, wow, you know, were we ever going to be able to do, you know, a show again? And I miss that feeling of, you know, putting the thing together. And you know, like I was saying before, but so when we did the first show, like I finally like really realized how much I missed it. And just having like a house full of people and gathering together to enjoy experience was why we created, you know, the show in the first place, is to, you know, create a communal experience in, I guess, under the auspices of, you know, pointing out how we've been driven apart, you know, historically. So yeah, so it was fun, man. I mean, it was fun, and I, you know, I probably went overboard in thanking people for coming to the show, you know, that as I opened it. But and that's something we talked about on stage too with the other folks I was hosting the show with, just, you know, who are actual comedians, and you know, like I said before, they have that's their main creative outlet. What it was like for them to come back, and you know, everybody was just really happy, and you know, we're just ready to have a good time. And I think really that's kind of where things are now, as I kind of look out and what's going on in social media and seeing what other people are doing. Like, people are just excited to have comedy back, and you know, being able to share those experiences again.
I gotta say, you definitely fool me as far as like not saying, you know, not being that guy on the stage, or not being that person like organize these things. Like someone who does it as often, and again, as someone who's seen you on the stage, is it's a different story, but you play it off well. So I'll give you that.
Bruce, I don't know, man. I'm an enigma, man. I can't explain it. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
Yeah, but you know, it'd be fair to say, we talk about Minority Retort, you know, we're talking about like the premier showcase for comedians of color in Oregon and the Northwest. Is that a fair? I know it's a I'm asking someone with a bit of a bias here, but
well, Bruce, that's certainly what I called it. I think I'm the one that coined that
right.
that description of the show. But yeah, man, I don't know. I'm more apt to, and this is anyone who's come to a Minority Retort show knows that I try to get off the stage as fast as I can. I know it's a weird ego thing, I guess. I kind of, I want to. I'm probably not the best host for the show necessarily, but I'm also a control freak, so I can't turn it over to anybody else. so that's part of the motivation, I think, for me putting myself front and center. But I try to get off as soon as I can so people can, really enjoy what they came to see, and I hide in the back.
Right. So can you just talk a little bit about sort of like how the platform, kind of like how you got started with the platform and how it's evolved over the years?
Yeah, well, I think, really the intent was just to, as we looked at the comedy scene, and I really kind of fell into the comedy scene. Like I'm not a comedian at all. I definitely don't consider myself to be a comedian. I can't get on stage and, I don't have a premise and I don't have a punchline. I don't have anything. But I always loved comedy, and I never thought I would be involved in it. Just kind of fell into it accidentally. As some folks were, they had an idea for a show, and as we looked at the comedy scene, and it kind of was reflective of what we see, or what the narrative is about Oregon. And like it's dominated by white dudes. I mean, like, not to say that there is not a rich, robust comedy community with for Black and brown people here, because there certainly is, and there's we have many comedians that we've had on the show over the years that reflects that. But I think just the perception of the comedy scene reflected the perception of the city and the region, that it was it's just mostly white. And to me, it's just like, I felt like, as we came up with the name of the show, Minority Retort, that kind of, we wanted to speak to that narrative of the whitest city in America. And I've never liked the term minority, and I've said elsewhere too that, to me, that always makes it seem like, if this is the whitest city in America and we're considered minorities, then our voice doesn't really have as much of an impact, or it doesn't have the value that the dominant representation, or the dominant demographic has. And so, I think we really just kind of wanted to speak to that, and that's why we put that in the name, Retort. So I think that's really kind of the motivation behind the show's origin. Now, you asked about the evolution of the show. I think that originally it was just intended for us to showcase the Black and brown talent that was here locally.
Can you just talk about what year it actually started in?
Oh, sure. Yeah, we started in 2015. And I kind of had, been on the periphery of the comedy scene. I used to have a podcast where I interviewed a lot of comedians, in addition to other local artists and et cetera. But I kind of just really, as I said, I've always been a comedy fan. It's kind of really gravitated more toward comedians, and had more and more of them on the podcast. And so that's kind of how this opportunity came up. It was just someone approached me, learning that I talk to comedians a lot, and they wanted to put the show together. But so we started that in 2015, and I think that like I said, we wanted to kind of feature the Black and brown comedians that were here locally. But as we kind of did a couple of shows, and to my surprise, we were pretty successful early on. I mean, I think a lot of people came out to the first couple of shows, and I was like, okay, well, this is like, it's a thing that's happening. All right, so maybe we could do something with this. But I think somebody early on remarked that, well, hey, and I think I asked for the honest truth about what the show was from this person. They said, well, the show's good, but you're going to run out of comedians in 6 months. So it's not going to last. So I really I was really offended by that, Bruce, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because once, I felt once we had a thing, I was like, well, I can't just let it die. Like, you gotta cultivate it, you gotta make it grow. So, if there's not, I guess by the numbers, a lot of comedians that are here. So, maybe the next thing to do to approach it would be to make it into an event and bring, the mountain to Muhammad, or lack of a better term. So, that's where kind of it's evolved from, where I really look to bring people here, to show that, hey, Portland is a place where if you're a Black and brown performer, it's a place you want to go. You may not necessarily have thought to come before, just because of the city's reputation.
And it was wild. I mean, it doesn't surprise me. It's, we are where we are. Someone would, that would be their takeaway from the show. But just like, I had a friend who was still does stand-up. He's in Vietnam now. But like when he was, getting started in the scene, like it's about a decade ago, so, me and some other people would go to his showcases, on all the like Fridays. And even then, just from like, seeing people in this kind of like in the beginning stages, middle stages of their careers, it was very clear. It's a lot of Black and brown, not just Black and brown comedians, but like very, very good Black and brown comedians around the city. So I don't know how anyone who, if they're plugged into the scene at all, because again, I'm talking about someone who's just, coming to see his friend kind of like work out his material week after week.
Yeah.
Anyone who's actually going to these shows or plugged into the scene to be like, well, you're going to run out in 6 months or whatever this is, like, that's absurd. Oh, man.
Yeah, well, and the thing is, I mean, when that person said that, I think we're still a couple months in. As I mentioned, now it's 6 years later, and we've not only we continue to have people come out to the shows here locally, but we do it in several different cities on a regular basis, and we've been to, I don't know, like 5 or 6 cities total in 3 different states. So and hopefully looking to grow more. So but I think that's really the other thing is too. I thought if it worked here, then perhaps it could work other places that that may have not a need for Black and brown voices, because each community has its own culture like that. But from a comedy standpoint, I don't. This is certainly not a unique idea, but I think for this region, I think it's something that we hopefully shine more of a spotlight on the talent that's here. So so that's the one thing that I feel really good about if the show's done anything.
I'll just plug it here because I'm on, support local, but I was listening to 2 Cent, the podcast, the other day. And I remember one of the hosts was talking about, one way to look at basically, living in Oregon and like talking about like how white the city is like, yeah, but there's also a lot of white people here who do want to, put money on Black things if, the opportunity. Sometimes you gotta like just show up at their door and throw the opportunity in their face, and we got to work on that. But there are customers, and I think so. It's kind of cool just seeing, again, providing a space for just like this collection of talent and comedy is, it's very much I don't know, it's kind of like a meeting ground for a lot of things. Like there aren't that many things where you can bring a lot of like different people together and be in a comfortable space. And yeah,
absolutely. I think that's one of the things that appealed to me, because I never thought about getting involved in comedy before this, and but just the idea of people coming together and sharing something, I guess that's the kind of the thing that really made me want to get involved in it. So yeah.
Right. And like you said, it's kind of like evolved where you've been able to go to different cities. You've done like been able to do spin-off stuff. I have a radio show, which is weekly. Yeah, can you just talk about Minority Retort Radio and kind of like where that's gone since you started?
Well, I should say we don't do the radio show anymore. I think you were talking about the coming through the pandemic and everything. I think the radio show is a casualty of the pandemic, if anything, because I just, as much as I was like, not personally like impacted, where I had to change my lifestyle and, and worry about where next meal was coming from and, all the things that a lot of people are having to deal with as a result of the pandemic. I was just really, really super, super busy, with my job was impacted by the pandemic, and that, it kind of was a roller coaster ride, I think, for that year because of that. And I just had to make some changes. So, I'm not sure how long you've been doing your show here, but I think anybody who does any kind of podcast or radio thing has the question, is anybody listening to this? And I'm sure many, many people are listening to your shows prior to this. I've been listening to that. But for me, it got to a point where doing the radio show on X-Ray FM was where we were. It got to a point where it's like, this is like a lot of work to put together. And is anybody listening to this? And I just didn't have the right answers for enough to keep going. So, I miss doing radio. I miss doing podcasts and stuff, but, it's just one of those things, just not enough time in the day, I guess. But, so that's why I'm excited to know that you're doing this, and so I don't have to do it anymore.
Well, it's a different level of responsibility to this. But I will say, it's funny you say that, because I definitely get that same feeling. I wonder is, I guess I've tried to like get my mind around, different metrics. I'm not sure if that's just, denial or something, but, whatever it takes to keep making a thing. But I think it was really, with the radio show, which is really kind of cool, like as opposed to, I was like, you got a comedy series. With the radio show, it kind of like really broadened out to where, you're interviewing actors, you're interviewing writers, you're interviewing people like me and whatever it is that I do, like
talented writers, I think is what you mean.
Something like that. But, I think, again, it's kind of what's been really cool with that, like some of the spinoffs. The other thing I want to talk about was like shows like Blackonteurs, which again, I was honored to be a performer on. But for those who don't know, can you just talk about how that series came together and what that was? And is there I'm curious, is that another casualty of the pandemic, or are there possibly plans for a return?
Well, so the Blackonteurs kind of came out of so once Minority Retort was kind of up and like I said, on its legs, and people kind of knew what it was and stuff, I was kind of thinking about what the next thing might be, and because I really kind of got sucked in or seduced by that idea of putting the thing together, and making it work. And so I wanted to see, hey, do it again. So I was kind of inspired by, I really had nothing to do with performance or anything like that. Never really done storytelling or anything of that nature before. And I saw there's a local group in town called Portland Story Theater. And I had the folks that run it, Lynn Duddy and Lawrence Howard, on my old podcast a few years ago. I was just hearing them talk about storytelling and what it was like for people to go through the process of not only like realizing that a story to tell, but shaping it into something with a beginning, middle, and end that somebody will want to listen to in a live format, and not just you're up there by yourself. You're not acting. You're not saying somebody else's words. You're not telling jokes. but you're telling about, you know, your life experience and how you're able to captivate a room, hold their attention based on something that you've experienced. And that was really intriguing to me. And I went to one of their performances and I was like, this is really kind of an amazing thing. And so as I was kind of looking at what I might do for like the next thing outside of Minority Retort, I looked around and I was thinking, well, hey, is there a storytelling show that just focuses on Black people and what the Black experiences is? And Bruce, you know, there wasn't any here in Portland.
Shocking.
So
Shocking.
Yeah. So I was like, you know, hey, okay, let's see if we can do something related to that. Oh, well, I guess I should circle back a little bit because we did actually, there was a Minority Retort storytelling show that we did once. And I think we're going to do it on a semi-regular basis, maybe 6 months or so after we started doing the comedy show. We did a storytelling show, and people seem to like that. And you know, but I think the reason why I came up with the Blackonteurs as opposed to making it like Minority Retort storytelling is, at that time I was also kind of thinking about really what the Black community was, and you know, I'm not from here originally, and so I don't have the history of knowing or personal experience with what it was like to be Black here growing up. So I don't, you know, I don't have the deep roots as being a member of the Black community here, and I don't remember what Portland was like before, you know, gentrification and things like that, right? So, so I was really kind of thinking about what the Black community actually really is, and you know, a few years ago, well, not a few years ago, now it's like 25 years ago, but I was a contributing writer to a comic book series published by Dark Horse Comics called Colors in Black. And the idea of that was an anthology series where we talked about race and race relations. And this is like 94, 95. And it was an anthology because we wanted to kind of show, you know, multiple sides of the Black experience. And that's why, you know, the series is called Colors in Black, because, you know, within the idea was within the color Black, there's multiple shades of, you know, of different experiences and, you know, and philosophies, and, you know, the whole idea that, you know, Blackness is not a monolith. And I was really kind of, you know, kind of wanted to explore that idea and really what it means. Because, you know, if you ask people what being Black is, you know, I think there's a common perception that it's agreed upon, but, you know, I don't know for myself if I believe that necessarily. And I kind of wanted to just hear more Black stories and hear as many different perspectives on being Black as possible. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where the idea came from. So, you know, so when we booked the show, you know, we try to have as many people from different walks of life, different backgrounds, different experiences as we can, so we can kind of provide that wide spectrum of Blackness, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's kind of where it came from.
Yeah, and you know, again, for people who haven't experienced it, you know, you could have. I mean, I remember my mother also did the storytelling performance, and you talk about the difference of experiences or difference in just content, because they forget the fact that like my mom and Cookie shared the same stage talking about, hey, you know, Cookie who does,
yeah, they had a couple different stories.
Yeah, Cookie who does, you know, his whole stories. Her name, not mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, with my mother from you know, South Carolina during the Civil Rights era. It's just you know, grew up in the church. It's very yeah, you bring in a lot of different people. But to that, I guess kind of like to that point, when you're just looking for, you know, potential performers, because I know like you reached out to me, it's like I wasn't a storyteller, my mother wasn't a storyteller. So how do you I guess besides just thinking I want people from different walks of life, is there kind of any like method to the madness in searching out people?
I don't know really. I mean, I think. Well, first of all, to comment on your mom for a second, I thought she was great. I was very pleased and honored that she did it. But I think one of the reasons why we would reach out to somebody like your mom to do the show, and this is kind of the difference I see between a storytelling show and like a comedy show, where you know, for comedy, there's not really much of an opportunity for someone like your mom's age to get up and do something. You know, I mean, it's not to say that it's solely comedy, solely a young person's game, but I mean that's just kind of the way that it ends up being, I guess. I don't know. There are a couple older comedians in town, but you know, you don't really hear that perspective on stage, I think, in spoken word form very often. So, you know, that's why I kind of was looking to have that be a component of, you know, showing the different sides of blackness as well, you know, because your mom has experienced things that, you know, I never have, and, you know, younger people haven't, obviously. So, but I think as we select people, I think we're looking for people that have, you know, something compelling to say, a story behind them, you know, someone that, you know, can impart some wisdom, or at least share part of an experience with an audience. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's basically the criteria. I mean, and like I said, we try to make it varied, as varied as we possibly can. But yeah, I don't know if that's method. It's probably 90% Madison, 10% method, if I had to guess.
And so, as I asked kind of before, are there plans for the Blackonteurs to come back, and yeah, when or what might we expect for that?
Yeah, you did ask about whether it was a casualty of the pandemic. I mean, no, I definitely don't want it to be. I think part of the struggle that we've had is we talked about doing it online, because we've done a couple of Minority Retort shows via Zoom or whatever, and we talked about doing that during the kind of the midst of the pandemic, but just never got together, because Leanne Johnson, I should mention, is the host of the Blackonteurs, who does a phenomenal job, and she actually did something with the show that I never even planned when I approached her to be host, where she, if you haven't seen the show, folks tell like about an 8 to 10 minute story on the show, and just, you know, goes straight through, and you know, we try to help them craft what it's going to be. But Leanne, as the host, she not only introduces the show and introduces the different performers that come up, but she takes the story that they just performed, and she's able, due to her improv background, she's one of the best improvisers in the city, she's able to kind of fashion her own related story kind of on the spot as interstitials between the storytellers. So it's really, really amazing. That's the thing that the other thing that really makes the show dear to me. It makes me want to keep doing it. But yeah, hopefully we're going to be able to bring it back soon. We were talking a couple weeks ago and try to figure out where to do it. Unfortunately, the venue where we did perform the show was a victim of the pandemic. So we're just trying to find a spot right now and kind of coordinate schedules. But yeah, we are looking to bring it back at some point, because, you know, we haven't done it since November of 2019, I want to say. And so, you know, obviously some things have happened since then.
Yeah, well, yeah, definitely hope to, you know, see it back. I think it's great for the city. I've loved going to them. So
Appreciate that.
You know, before we kind of like move off of Minority Retort and kind of like the offshoots, I'm just curious, you know, as you know, doing God knows how many shows now, like if there are any is any in particular that kind of like was memorable shows or memorable stories from shows, and they don't have to be, you know, if you want to embarrass people, feel free, you know.
Well, the only people I take pleasure in embarrassing are my family. So and they, they're not involved in that. So, and I probably shouldn't do that on a recording.
I suppose.
But but let's see, memorable shows. I mean, I think our biggest shows. I mean, we've been fortunate that we've been involved with some big shows. I think probably the most memorable ones, like the biggest ones, were a couple that we did at the Hollywood Theater. We had a comedian named David Bory, who, he's not in movies or anything, but if you like comedy, you know who he is. He now does a very popular podcast called All Fantasy Everything with also former Portland comedians Ian Carmel and Sean Jordan. That's huge now. And that was probably one of the biggest audiences we ever had, was at the Hollywood Theater. And was an awesome show. I think, and also getting Marcela Arguello, who again is another popular comedian, getting her on the show a couple years ago was a highlight, because that was the first time it was a huge headliner who plays clubs, that I was able to kind of work out the deal and working with management and things, like to get that all squared away, and like trying to get somebody like that is like trying to get, the white whale, I guess, no pun intended, but you kind of have to go through a lot of stuff to get to him. So, having her come out on that stage finally after months and months and months of work behind the scenes, and have it be an awesome show, that really stands out. But I think really probably the one that stands out the most is our second show ever, where we had Curtis Cook, who was a popular comedian here in town. He's now in LA and doing great. Was headlining that show. But we had a guest spot, or offered a guest spot to Baron Vaughn, who folks know, he's very popular, comes up here, or used to come up here for Bridgetown a lot, and now is on the series Grace and Frankie and does a lot of acting and stuff. But he was doing Helium, I think, while we were doing that show, our second show. And someone reached out to him and said, "Hey, you want to do a guest spot on this all black show or whatever they're doing?" And he's like, "Yeah." And it's one of those things like, you reach out to somebody, you don't know what's going to happen, but to see him walk through the door of Curious Comedy Theater, and knowing that he was going to come and do the show, and he was somebody who was recognizable, and this show was like basically created out of nothing, and we got a guy with that credibility, who was actually, he came up and he was awesome. And I think we gave him a couple bucks, and he was like, yeah, he was really excited to get that. I had by a couple bucks, I think I mean a couple bucks, but he was still like, hey, I wasn't expecting to get anything. So just that, I just will never forget that moment of just him walking through the door, just seeing, was like, okay, this is like legit, like this is gonna be a thing. And so like that's when I knew, like, if we just worked hard enough, we'd be able to get people to do it. So that's kind of what stands out the most. It was our second show we peaked, Bruce.
But at the same time, I imagine it's gotta be nice seeing, whether it's people like Curtis, maybe these other people who like come through, a lot of people have gotten to know, seeing through like Minority Retort and whatnot, and then seeing them, go to LA, get on this national stage and kind of like just kill it in these different roles. I mean, you gotta feel like not like a proud father, but like like it's gotta be cool being in the process, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, I certainly, I welcome, and I see, the success that some people have had that have moved on from Portland, whether they've been on Minority Retort or not. I mean, I think that's one of the cool things about Portland. It's, there's some weirdness. I think there's the weirdness that goes on in any art scene, but in any community. But I think it's also tight knit here, and people support each other and stuff, and really want to see other people succeed. And so when they go off and do that and thrive, it's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. For me, I'm not a Portland comedy historian by any means, but it just, I don't know. It feels like people. I know some people have not necessarily like native Oregonians, but they, like Ron Funches, who spent a bunch of time here and whatnot. like it feels like there's more people kind of like from the Portland, like Oregon scene that have kind of like really, I don't know, just really hit it big in these last like several years. But like I said, I'm not a Portland comic historian. It just, I don't know, something feels different. So
Yeah, no, I think definitely he was one of the people that kind of paved the way for Portland comedy to, be recognized as a scene, and that you can come here and you can cultivate your act, and you can go on to do big things. And I was kind of really starting to get into the comedy thing right when he was right before he went on Conan, and then he was gone after that. So we never had him on our show. I'd love to have him on. But yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of one of the cool things to see, just like the evolution of comedy in Portland. I think people have gone on to be successful elsewhere and take their stuff out on the road, and it really is kind of like a comedy destination now. And I think people have moved here specifically to do comedy and grow their own comedy and find their own voice here. So that's pretty cool too.
Absolutely. So I'm moving off of that. You talked earlier about kind of like, not being from Portland, not being familiar with all the history. Like, you just talk about kind of like your journey to the town. Like, where were you born and raised, and what brought you here?
Yeah, so I wish it was exciting, but it's not. But no, man, it's kind of just a weird trip more than anything. I think as most people's lives are, I guess, to take weird twists and turns. But for me, I grew up in Seattle, born and raised, lived there most of my early adult life, as well, and then moved here when I was in '98, so I was like 28 or something like that. But I grew up as a comic book guy, man. I mean, that's still like my first love. I think if you ask people that I went to grade school with or high school, if they ask you what I was doing now, they'd probably say I was a comic book artist, because that was my thing in school. That's what I thought I was going to be. And then that kind of evolved, as I had kind of a friend group up in Seattle that we would work on stuff together. I think my drawing skills kind of peaked at a certain point, and I started to explore writing, and so I became a comic book writer, or a wannabe comic book writer anyway. And as I mentioned earlier, we ended up doing a book for Dark Horse Comics, an anthology book. And then after that, we did a Predator book that I co-wrote with a friend of mine, also for Dark Horse. And Bruce, as a lifelong comic book fan and a wannabe comic book artist, and I'm in my mid-20s, finally getting some work from a legitimate comic book company. Man, I thought I was on my way, man. I thought I was the I thought I had it made. I did not have it made, Bruce. I did those 2 comic books and tried to do many others, and did not have the opportunity to do that. But I thought that once we had those 2 published, I thought, yeah, maybe I should just change something in my life. And my brother was an actor. He lived in New York for a long time, but he moved out to Los Angeles. And he said that, hey, if you're serious about this writing thing, because I was interested in screenwriting as well. He's like, hey, if you really want to do a screenwriting thing, you should quit your job up in Seattle. You should move down here with me, and we should just work on screenplays and just try and get in this business, man. And I was like, my job wasn't going anywhere, relationship wasn't really going anywhere. And I thought, what do I got to lose? I got to change something up. So my friend lived here in Portland, and he had a big house that his father left to him, and he was looking for roommates. And I thought, okay, well, when I went there, there's a cool atmosphere. Like, I knew a couple people. Dark Horse Comics is located here. Maybe I'll write a couple comics. I'll supplement my income by writing comics. And I'll stay there for like 6 months, and I'll come up with screenplay, and then I'll move to Los Angeles, and then everything will be going. I'll be on easy street. Well, that was 1998, Bruce. And I still have yet to finish that screenplay. And I guess, someday I will, but I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon. So in the meantime, I'm doing comedy stuff. I guess, in there, like, I kind of got pulled away from writing and stuff like that because of the family and all that stuff that we ended up having. And that's how I got into podcasting, because I was kind of looking to, since I wasn't able to write, I figured, I still want to be connected to the art scene somehow. So I really was able to recognize kind of what was going on in the art scene through podcasting and talking to people. And that's kind of how the connections were made, with people I met in the artistic circles and comedic circle and the comedy circle and stuff like that. So that's kind of what, the short version. there's a long version of that I'm not going to say. We don't have time for.
Yeah, and around what year, around what time would you say kind of like podcasting kind of really got on your radar?
Yeah, so it's probably around 2007, 2008, where I discovered podcasts. I think there are a lot of people have a similar experience to me. Mark Maron was one of the first podcasts that I listened to. And he was kind of, I find him more intriguing at the time because he was kind of going through a similar crisis, a midlife crisis. Well, every day is a midlife crisis for Mark Maron if you've listened to the podcast. But he was kind of going at a career crossroads. Wasn't sure what he was going to do. And so he kind of just started doing it. And I thought, well, if this guy can do it, and he's doing it out of his garage, like, kind of open up the possibilities, that you can still just do something. All you gotta do is do something, and that was my affliction, and still is, truth be told. I try against it as much as I can, but it's sitting around and thinking of something and thinking of something and thinking of something. You can think of something to death, but at some point, if it's going to exist, you got to do it. You got to do it. You got to put paint to a canvas. You got to, you got to send that email. You gotta write the thing down, or whatever it is. You gotta get up on stage in front of the microphone. You gotta do it. And so I think that podcasting was kind of a simple way, I think, for me. And I always loved radio, but I didn't want to go through the rigmarole of trying to get a job in radio. So why not? If you can create your own radio station, or your own radio show, then why not do it? And so it was just a way of doing something, so I think that's kind of where it came from. And there's a lot of freedom to it. There's no real gatekeepers, or at least there wasn't at the time. You can kind of just do it, and hopefully the cream rises to the top. But but even if it doesn't, if you do it because you enjoy it, then that's really the thing that matters the most.
Mm-hmm. So talking about around 2007, you're kind of like, first kind of like the bug is kind of getting put into your ear about, let me explore podcasting. So when does Fun Employment Radio come into the picture?
Yeah, so I do have a drive, I do have ambition, and I do somehow, I think through the podcast through the process of putting together a podcast, kind of discovered that I'm pretty good at getting people to sit down at a place at a particular time together. But I have no technical ability whatsoever. Like, I should never touch anything that has electricity running through it whatsoever, because someone's going to get hurt. So I had no idea about how to do the technical side of recording a podcast, or where we'd even do it, or anything like that. So, but fortunately, I had a friend who he had some experience in public access television, and kind of like knew, some of the technical stuff. And so I approached him about doing this podcast, because there was a place called Portland Radio Authority, which for all intents and purposes is like a pirate internet radio station, or whatever. I can't remember how exactly they describe themselves, but they kind of had a little spot with recording equipment in one of the active space buildings. And so, we just came up with the concept and figured out who we kind of would want to talk to. And with his help, we were able to to do that, and we started doing that in 2011. And then we did that there for a couple of years, but they ended up shutting down. And so, we're kind of trying to figure out if we still wanted to do it. And through some mutual friends, we got hooked up Fun Employment Radio. And so we were able to do that there. And for folks that know Fun Employment Radio, but a longtime podcast here in Portland, run by Greg Nibbler and Sir X Dillon. And they kind of had a loose network of other shows that were kind of under the Fun Employment Radio banner. And so we just approached them after being connected to some mutual friends and said, hey, this is what we've been doing. And they liked it. So we ended up doing a couple of years with them as well. And then X-Ray kind of came out of, so Minority Retort and X-Ray came out of someone hearing the show, the podcast that we used to do on Fun Employment Radio. And we're like, hey, we're looking for a spot on the morning show. And I was just trying to figure out what to do for that. I was like, well, why not just keep things simple and just make a Minority Retort spinoff of the comedy show, where, kind of be a companion piece to the comedy show where, it's not just focused on comedy, but talking about the Black and brown experience with creative people. So that's kind of where it came from.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, we just talk about like all these, creative endeavors, I guess, or actually before we get to that, you were also a big part of the Portland Podcast Festival. Can you just, tell the story of that? Yeah. Yeah,
well, Bruce, as we're talking, I'm really kind of realizing what a sickness I have. Like I just, like I really just am pushed to kind of do these things that don't make me any money, to my wife's chagrin. But so I was talking about Fun Employment Radio a moment ago, and I just really love radio. I really love podcasting. I just think it's just great to talk to people and just get them to talk about their own experiences. I just love doing that. And I listen to podcasts all the time. Not as much now, but back then I was podcasts all the time, especially, at work and everything. If you have a boring job like I do, you want to listen to 7 or 8 podcasts during the course of the day. And so I was really trying to figure out how to get more and more into that. I also really loved conventions. And I don't know if you've ever been to Rose City Comic Con or Emerald City or the San Diego Comic Convention. But they're just an amazing experience if you're into the thing. If you're into something and to be surrounded by thousands of people who like the same thing you do, it's kind of a cool thing. Again, that kind of community thing. And so that was I was trying to figure out a way to kind of build that again. And so there's a lot of people do podcasts. In fact, like this is one of the top cities in the country that are home to podcasts. And so I was trying to figure out a way to tap into that and and build that community. And so that's where the idea of the podcast festival came from. And so I talked to Greg and Sarah about doing it. They became my partners in it, and we were able to do it for a couple of years, mostly with local podcasts, especially the first year, kind of having them put together and doing like a festival where people can come and and they can just browse and go to different recordings of different podcasts and all different kinds of shows, that people can experience. And if you listen to it, if they only listen to it, they'd be able to see the people that do it, live. So that's kind of what we were trying to do with the podcast festival. And we were able to do that for a couple of years there back in 2017, 2018 or so. But, I don't know, that might be a definite victim of the pandemic there, because I'm not sure what happens with conventions going forward,
Right. I would be remiss to say that I think I would definitely not call it a sickness. It's creativity. I know to some of the people around you, they're chagrin sometimes to creativity. I know from my own endeavors, but I don't know. I think these are good things, but yeah, kind of with that in mind, as far as like, kind of talked about the return of Minority Retort earlier, but you know, kind of like what can people, I guess, like look forward to, whether it be Minority Retort or other potential projects you have on the horizon?
Yeah, I think well, I mean, the main thing is Minority Retort. I'm really excited about where I think the show is going to go over the next year or so. I mean, there's so many people that I want to work with, that I've talked to, and you know, kind of making some inroads and how to get them on the show, and you know, so I think it's going to be a pretty big year. Hopefully, you know, if we're able to stay the course and get things back to where it's you know, it's going to be healthy and safe for everyone to go to shows on a regular basis. I'm really excited about where the show is going. I think some people coming in over the next year or so, hopefully, that I'm really excited to work with. But we have a show coming up on July 30th with Neil Nanda, that who's been on the show before, and a very talented guy that's been on late night and performance festivals all over the country. So excited to have him back. And our show in mid-August with Subha Agarwal, who's a TV writer and funny stand-up comedian. We've been trying to get on the show for years, doing headline spot. That's going to be August 13th here in Portland. So yeah, I'm really excited about those two shows coming up, and then we have a bunch of stuff planned for the remainder of the year and going into 2022 that should be pretty big.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, Jason Lamb, thank you again for coming on the Blacktastic Adventure today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for watching. Please like and share and subscribe so you can stay up to date on all of the latest videos. Thank you.